lateral, away from the plane that divides a bilateral animal into mirror images, while medial or median, on or near the plane that divides a bilateral animal into mirror images. The use of molecular data has altered zoology's interpretation of animal taxonomy. This figure right here is a tree depicting an independent origin of the basal phyla, Dinophora, Porifera, Placozoa, Acelomorpha, and Cnidaria included. While members of the phyla containing bilaterally symmetrical animals are divided into three groups, which are your Lophotrochozoa, Ecdysozoa, and Deuterostomia. The Lophotrochozoa are protostomes that do not molt, meaning these are the group of animals that do not shed their skin. They include the annelids, mollusks, and others. The Ecdysozoa, on the other hand, are protostomes that molt. They include nematodes, arthropods, and others. The Deuterostomia includes echinoderms, hemichordates, and as humans under chordates or chordata. Now, to summarize taxonomy and systematics, it allows us to organize the immense diversity of life in a meaningful way. By studying phylogeny and using tools like cladistics and cladograms, we can trace how organisms are related and how they evolved over time. Next, we apply these principles to the simplest animal-like organisms, the protozoa, which represents the earliest stage of animal evolution. Now that we've learned how animals are classified and related through evolution, let's move on to the simplest animal-like organism, the protozoa. As you can see in the figure, there is a broken line in between the whole kingdom Animalia, which would include the basal phyla, Lophotrochozoa, Ecdysozoa, and Deuterostomia, while Protista or Protists are on the outside. Protozoa are fascinating because they bridge the gap between single-celled organism and true multicellular animals. They're often called animal-like protists or protozoans because they are unicellular but show animal-like behavior, such as movement and feeding. Even though they're single-celled, protozoa perform all basic functions of life, like feeding, digestion, excretion, reproduction, and even sensing their surroundings. So you can think of them as a microscopic version of animals living in water, soil, and sometimes inside other organisms. Let's look at some key characteristics of protozoa. First, they are unicellular eukaryotes, which mean they have a true nucleus and membrane-bound organelles just like higher animals. Second, they can live in a variety of habitats, mostly aquatic environment, both freshwater and marine, and even as parasite inside other organisms. Third, they are heterotrophic, meaning they obtain food by ingesting other small organisms or organic matter rather than photosynthesizing like plants. And finally, they move using special structures such as flagella, cilia, or pseudopodia depending on their group. By definition, protozoans is a complete organism in which all life activities are carried on within a single plasma membrane. Protozoans lack collagen and chitinous cell walls, which are primarily belonging to higher animals. Protozoa display unicellular or cytoplasmic eukaryotic organization, which does not necessarily imply they are simple organisms. Movement is one of the defining features of protozoa. Different groups use different structures for locomotions. Those with flagella use long whip-like tails to propel themselves, think of Euglena. Those with cilia moving using many tiny hair-like structures all over their body like Paramecium. And those with pseudopodia or false feet that we've already discussed in class move by extending and retracting parts of their cytoplasm, such as amoeba. These structures not only help them move but also play a role in capturing food. Next, let's talk about protozoa feet. Protozoans are heterotrophs, so they rely mainly on other organisms for food. Some, like amoeba, use their pseudopodia to engulf food particles from the environment. This process is called phagocytosis. Others, like Paramecium, have a specialized feeding groove called an oral groove, where food enters. Once inside, food is enclosed in a food vacuole, where digestion takes place. The undigested materials is then expelled from the cell even though they're microscopic. The feeding process is surprisingly similar to digestion in higher animals, just on a smaller scale. Protozoa reproduce in two main ways, asexually and sexually. The most common method is asexual reproduction, usually through binary fission, where one cell divides into two identical cells. For an instance, if you cut a protozoans, then it has a probability that the two cats will be alive after some time. Some protozoans also reproduce sexually through a process called conjugation, where two individuals exchange genetic materials before separating. This genetic exchange increases variation, which helps species adapt and survive in changing environment. Many of these protozoans would have symbiotic lifestyle, wherein symbiosis is an intimate association between two organisms. For many protozoans, this interaction involve a form of symbiosis called parasitism, in which one organism lives in or on a second organism called the host. The host is harmed but usually survives, at least long enough for the parasite to complete one or more life cycles. The relationship between a host and a parasite are often complex. Some parasites have life cycles involving multiple hosts. The definitive host harbors the sexual stage of the parasite. The sexual stages may produce offspring that enter another host, called an intermediate host, where they reproduce asexually. Some life cycles require more than one intermediate host and more than one immature stage. For the life cycle to be complete, the final asexual stage must have access to a definitive host. Additionally, protozoans are grouped according to how they move. Let's go over the four main groups. First, the mastigophorans or the flagellates. They move using one or more flagella. Example would include euglena or trypanosoma. Second, the sarcodines. They move using pseudopodia like amoeba. Third, the ciliates, covered with cilia for movement and feeding such as paramecium. And fourth, the sporozoans. These are non-motile and usually parasitic like Plasmodium, the organism that causes malaria. Each group has a unique adaptation that suits their lifestyle. Protozoans may be microscopic, but they may play huge roles in the ecosystem and human life. In nature, they help maintain ecological balance by feeding on bacteria and recycling nutrients in aquatic environment. Some protozoans are symbiotic, living harmlessly inside other organisms, even helping with digestion. However, others are parasitic, causing diseases such as malaria, amoebic dysentery, and sleeping sickness. So protozoa can be both beneficial and harmful, depending on the species and the environment. To summarize, protozoa are single-celled animal-like protists that show many features similar to animals. They move, feed, and reproduce just like higher animals, but at the cellular level. They can be classified by their mode of movement, flagella, cilia, pseudopodia, or none at all. And while they play essential roles in an ecosystem, some also have significant medical importance such as parasites. Understanding protozoa help us appreciate how complex life evolved from simple beginnings, from single-celled organism to multicellular animals.